You'll never see a penny of our family's money." My father yelled across the Christmas dinner table. I just looked at him, feeling nothing but a cold, quiet calm. How could I possibly tell him his entire fortune was a rounding error to me? My name is Beatrice Vance, and I'm 32 years old. Tonight, on Christmas Eve, my family banished me to their unheated garage in Lake Forest, Illinois, where the temperature is currently hovering around 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is so cold it burns to breathe, and I can see my breath pluming in the harsh light of a single bare bulb. They did this to make room for my sister's boss, a man they deem more important than their own daughter. They see me sitting here on this rickety camping cot, surrounded by dusty boxes and forgotten junk, and they see the family failure. The one who threw away a Northwestern education to chase some internet dream. What they don't see is this laptop, currently humming on my knees. They don't know that with a single email, I can finalize the acquisition of the prestigious Chicago investment bank where my sister works. They don't know that the fate of Vance & Sons, the manufacturing company my father spent his life building his entire legacy, also rests on the keystrokes I'm about to make. They think they've exiled me to the cold. In reality, they've just given me the quiet I needed to burn their world to the ground. This isn't just one of those family revenge stories you hear about. This is the story of how I took back my name. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, the one whose dreams were always dismissed, just type the city you're watching from in the comments. Let's see how far this silent strength of ours truly reaches. This didn't happen overnight. This silent rage, this meticulously planned revenge, it was forged over decades of quiet dismissals and loud proclamations of my inadequacy. You see, to understand my family, you have to understand Lake Forest. It's a world built on old money and even older traditions. My father, Walter Vance, is a man of steel and concrete. He believes in things you can touch, the factory floor of Vance & Sons, the weight of a stock certificate, the satisfying thud of a closing dividend check. To him, my world of code, data, and algorithms was imaginary, a frivolous distraction from the real business of life. My sister, Penelope, was the perfect daughter he molded. She excelled at Northwestern, went straight to a prestigious role at Sterling and Finch, and never once questioned the path laid out for her. She was the star. My younger brother, Arthur, was the designated heir, groomed to take over the family business. And I was the variable they couldn't solve. The dreamer, the disappointment. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering was a performance where my siblings' achievements were celebrated and my passions were treated as a quirky, unfortunate phase I would hopefully outgrow. They didn't just misunderstand my ambition. They were fundamentally offended by it because it wasn't a reflection of their own. Let me know in the comments. Were you the scapegoat in your family, the one blamed for everything that didn't fit the picture? Or were you the golden child, the one who could do no wrong? I'm genuinely curious to see the balance in our community here. Seeing the comments roll in, it's clear these family roles, the star and the scapegoat, are drawn in households all across the country. For years, I wore the label they gave me. I let their definition of success make me feel small. But here's the thing about being cast into the shadows. It gives you an incredible, unobstructed view of the stage. You see the props, the trapdoors, the strings pulling the puppets. You learn the mechanics of the show. And you start to wonder what it would be like to write your own script. My plan wasn't born from a single moment of anger. It was a slow, quiet resolve that grew with every condescending remark and every dismissive sigh. It wasn't enough to just become successful on my own terms. No, that would be too simple. They would just dismiss it as a fluke. The revenge had to be poetic. It had to be surgical. I had to take the very institutions they worshipped, the legacy of steel and the prestige of high finance, and make them my own. I had to become the master of the universe they thought I could never even comprehend. So, for 5 years, I built my Trojan horse. I operated in the shadows, a ghost in the machine of the new economy, all while planning the silent takeover of their old world. What you are about to hear is not just a story of a daughter getting even. It's the detailed blueprint of how a ghost dismantled an empire, piece by painstaking piece, right under the noses of the kings who thought they were invincible. To understand the empire I was targeting, you first have to understand its king, my father, Walter Vance. His kingdom wasn't our pristine home in Lake Forest. It was a sprawling, noisy factory on the industrial outskirts of Chicago called Vance and Sons Manufacturing. For him, that place was sacred ground. I remember him taking us there as kids, the air thick with the smell of hot metal and machine oil, the floor vibrating with the roar of American-made steel being pressed into automotive parts. He would stand there, hands on his hips, and survey the factory floor like it was the most beautiful landscape on earth. "This is real, Beatrice," he'd say over the din. "This is what builds a country, not fantasies on a screen." Vance and Sons was more than a business. It was our identity. It paid for the manicured lawns, the private school tuitions, and the unspoken rule that success in our family was something you could measure in tons of steel and quarterly earnings reports. My father's mood was inextricably linked to the company's stock performance, a barometer that set the emotional weather for our entire household. The pressure to live up to that name, to be a worthy part of that tangible, respectable legacy, was immense. It was a heavy crown, and my siblings wore it with pride. I, on the other hand, found it suffocating. I have to ask, did you grow up with a heavy family name or a specific legacy you are expected to uphold? It doesn't have to be a company. It could be a tradition or a reputation. If you've ever felt the weight of those expectations, just type legacy in the comments below. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Reading your comments, so many of you know exactly what the pressure of legacy feels like. In my family, that legacy wasn't just a standard to live up to. It was the yardstick they used to measure my worth, and I always came up short. The dismissal was constant, delivered in 1,000 subtle cuts. I remember my sophomore year at Northwestern. My parents were visiting for the weekend. I was so excited to show them a small web application I had built to help students manage their study schedules. I had spent weeks on it, poring over lines of code until 3 in the morning. "Look," I said, my voice buzzing with pride as I opened my laptop. "I built this from scratch." My father glanced at the screen for barely a second. "That's a nice little hobby, B," he said, before turning to my mother. "Did you hear Penelope just landed the summer internship at Sterling and Finch? Now that's a real career. A hobby. My passion, my sleepless nights, my future reduced to a hobby." A few years later, at a Thanksgiving dinner, I made the mistake of trying to explain the concept of my startup. Penelope just laughed, a sharp, condescending sound that cut through the clatter of silverware. "Oh, B, that's adorable," she said, swirling the wine in her glass, chasing venture capital. "We have a term for that on Wall Street, unemployed." Every word was a stone, building a wall between us. These moments became the foundation of one of the most calculated family revenge stories ever conceived. That wall they built, stone by stone, was about to meet its wrecking ball. The tipping point, the moment a lifetime of resentment crystallized into a concrete plan, came during my junior year at Northwestern. I had a breakthrough. A genuine, game-changing breakthrough with the logistics algorithm I was developing. I'd even caught the attention of an angel investor in California who was interested, but I needed to formalize the business, to show I had some skin in the game. I needed seed money. So, I did the hardest thing I could imagine. I went home and scheduled a formal meeting in my father's sacred study, the one with the mahogany desk and the leather-bound books he'd never read. I laid out my business plan, my market analysis, my 5-year projections. I wasn't a starry-eyed kid. I was a businesswoman. I asked for $50,000 less than what they'd spent on Penelope's last European vacation. My father listened, his face hardening with every word I spoke. When I finished, he didn't just say no. He erupted. $50,000? He roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "I would rather burn that money in this fireplace than attach the Vance name to this digital fantasy. You are throwing away your education, your future, your name." He gave me an ultimatum. Abandon my hobby, get my degree, and take a job at a company he approved of, or I would be cut off completely. My mother just stood by the doorway, weeping silently, offering nothing. In that cold, silent study, I realized he wasn't just refusing to invest in my company. He was refusing to invest in me. That night, I packed one suitcase, emptied my bank account of $2,300, and bought a one-way ticket to Austin, Texas. Landing in Austin with a single suitcase, a used laptop, and a fire in my belly was the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life. The first year was a blur of 18-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and ramen noodles. I lived in a tiny studio apartment south of the river, the kind where you can touch your kitchen counter from your bed. To my family, I was adrift. I'd send them sporadic, vague emails about freelance projects, letting them believe their prophecy of my failure was coming true. I never once asked for a dime. Their silence was all the confirmation I needed that they were content to let me struggle. But in that tiny apartment, I wasn't struggling. I was building an arsenal. I founded Vanguard Dynamics. At first, it was just me, coding until my eyes burned. Then, after landing that first round of funding from the investor who believed in me, I hired my first employee. Then 3. Soon, we moved out of my apartment and into a real office. All the while, I remained a ghost. I was the anonymous founder, the strategic mind behind the curtain, while my trusted COO became the public face of the company. Every condescending word from my father, every smug remark from Penelope, became code for my next product feature, fuel for my next investor pitch. My anger wasn't just an emotion, it was the most efficient energy source I had ever discovered. Tell me, what's the one thing that fuels you when you feel like giving up? For me, it was their doubt. If you've ever used someone else's disbelief as your own personal rocket fuel, type rocket fuel in the comments. Let's acknowledge that powerful, defiant energy. And let me tell you, that rocket fuel didn't just launch a company, it powered a 5-year mission with 2 very specific targets. As Vanguard Dynamics grew into a $5 billion behemoth, I funneled a portion of our profits into a quiet investment subsidiary. Its purpose was singular: to acquire power in the old world. Target number 1 was Sterling and Finch, the prestigious investment bank that was the source of my sister Penelope's immense pride. While she was at family gatherings, bragging about her 7-figure bonuses and looking down on my little website, my subsidiary was silently buying up shares of her company on the open market. She saw herself as a queen in her ivory tower, never realizing that I was buying the ground right out from under it. The final move was a swift, hostile takeover, a $1.2 billion deal that would leave the board reeling. Target number 2 was more personal: Vance & Sons, my father's soul. It wasn't publicly traded, but my father wasn't the sole owner. He had partners, minority shareholders who I knew were frustrated with his refusal to innovate. Through a different, even more discreet shell corporation, my team approached them one by one. We offered them a premium on their shares, a golden parachute they couldn't resist. He was so blinded by his own pride, he never thought to check who was buying. By the time the ink was dry on the final deal, I controlled 60% of his company, the company that bore our name. I timed it all perfectly. Both acquisitions were set to finalize the week before Christmas. I would own my sister's future and my father's past, all before the Christmas ham was even carved. With both deals secretly finalized, I drove my 10-year-old Honda Civic, my official family visit car, to Lake Forest for the final performance. The house was a perfect Christmas postcard, gleaming with lights and smelling of pine and roasting turkey. The smiles were just as bright and just as fake. As I was hanging up my coat, our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, popped in to drop off a tin of homemade cookies. She's known me since I was 5. Her eyes lit up. "Beatrice, it's so wonderful to see you. What have you been up to down there in Texas?" Before I could offer my usual vague, practiced answer, my mother swooped in, her hand gripping my arm a little too tightly. "Oh, Beatrice is still exploring her passions," she chirped, her voice painfully bright. "Lots of creative little projects on the internet. We're just so thrilled she's home." Exploring passions was my mother's code for unemployed. Penelope, never one to miss an opportunity, added with a saccharine smile. "She's our free spirit, Mrs. Gable. We keep telling her there's a real job with a 401 kelvins waiting for her in Chicago whenever she's ready to settle down." I just stood there, a polite smile frozen on my face, the heat of humiliation creeping up my neck. They weren't just insulting me, they were performing my failure for an audience. Any lingering flicker of doubt I had about my plan was extinguished in that moment. Have you ever had to wear that mask? That polite smile while your own family publicly minimizes you, just to keep the peace? If you know that feeling all too well, just type the word mask into the comments. It's a silent nod to everyone who's had to hide their true feelings for the sake of appearances. The performance continued at the dinner table. The magnificent dining room, with its crystal chandelier and heirloom silverware, felt like a movie set. A beautiful scene designed to hide a rotten script. Miss Sterling was seated at the head of the table, with my parents and Penelope fawning over him. I was placed at the far end, an island of social Siberia. Trying to be polite, Mr. Sterling turned to me. So, Beatrice, Penelope tells me you're in Austin. The tech scene there is exploding, isn't it? For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of energy. It is, I said, my voice clear and steady. Especially in AI-driven logistics. We're seeing a massive shift. Before I could finish, Penelope cut in with a tinkling laugh. Oh, let's not bore our guest with shop talk, B. This time, I didn't let it slide. I looked directly at Mr. Sterling and said, it's actually the future of how every company, including yours, will manage its assets. The table fell silent. It was a small act of defiance, but it was enough. My father's face turned to stone. That's enough, he said, his voice dangerously low. He stared down the length of the table at me, his eyes cold. I am warning you. Do not embarrass this family with your fantasies. One more word, and I will call my attorney first thing Monday morning and have you written out of the family trust. You will not see a single cent of the $50 million legacy your grandfather and I built. He thought it was his trump card, the ultimate threat. I just held his gaze, feeling the delicious, burning irony of it all. He was trying to buy my silence with a rounding error. The silence that followed my father's threat was absolute. No one defended me. My mother stared at her plate. My brother suddenly seemed fascinated by the ceiling. They were all complicit, silent co-signers of my exile. It was my mother who finally broke the tension, her voice brittle with false cheerfulness as she moved on to logistics. Well, to get everyone settled, Mr. Sterling, the guest suite is all yours. Penelope, your room is just as you left it. And Arthur is in his old room. She paused, deliberately, letting the unspoken question hang in the air. Then, without looking at me, she delivered the final blow. And Beatrice, dear, we've set up the camping cot for you in the garage. We've put plenty of blankets out there. It'll be an adventure, just for one night. The garage, where they kept the broken lawnmower, the holiday decorations, and the things they didn't want to deal with. Now, that included me. A 10-degree night in an unheated concrete box. It wasn't an oversight, it was a statement. I glanced at Penelope and saw it a tiny, triumphant smirk. This was her idea. The inheritance threat was my father's club, but the garage, that was my sister's knife. And in that moment, the last vestiges of hurt vanished, replaced by a chilling, absolute certainty. I simply nodded. Fine. The quiet acceptance seemed to unnerve them more than any protest. They didn't know it was the calm of a general watching the enemy walk directly into her perfectly laid trap. We all have that one moment. That final act of disrespect that erases all doubt and makes everything clear. It's a painful gift. If you've had a garage moment in your own life, that final straw that changed everything, just write clarity in the comments. It's a quiet salute to the moment we knew we had to save ourselves. I walked to the garage without another word. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing me in the biting cold. The smell of old gasoline and dust hung in the air, a single bare bulb flickering overhead, casting long, dancing shadows. I sat on the edge of the sagging cot, the cold from the concrete floor already seeping through the soles of my shoes. I opened my laptop, the screen a defiant splash of warmth and light in the darkness. I typed in my password and pulled up the pre-written executive order. My finger hovered over the send button. Just then, the door from the house creaked open. It was Mr. Sterling, looking deeply uncomfortable. Beatrice, he started, his voice low. I apologize for intruding. I just wanted to say, this isn't right. If you'd like, I can sleep on the... Before he could finish, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. Then again. And again. A cascade of urgent notifications. He frowned. How strange. The entire executive team on Christmas Eve. He pulled it out, his thumb swiping across the screen. I watched his face shift through the stages of a man whose reality is being dismantled in real time. First, confusion. Then, pale disbelief. Finally, his jaw went slack with pure, unadulterated shock. "No," he whispered, staring at the screen. "That's impossible." Acquired? By Vanguard Dynamics? His phone rang, and he answered it on instinct. Harold Sterling. He listened for a moment, his eyes still glued to the email. "Yes, I see it now. No, I had no prior knowledge. The CEO wants to speak with me now?" He trailed off, listening to the voice on the other end. Then, very slowly, he lowered the phone and his eyes lifted to meet mine. The dawning recognition in them was everything I had waited 5 years to see. "They're saying, she's here." Mr. Sterling stared at me, his face a mask of dawning horror. The phone was still pressed to his ear. I calmly held out my hand. "May I?" He handed it over with a robotic, trembling movement. I put the phone to my ear, and for the first time in front of any of them, I used my real voice, the one that commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. "James, it's B," I said, my tone crisp and devoid of emotion. "Yes, I'm here. The timeline has moved up. Execute phase 2. Send the notification to the leadership at Vance and Sons, and confirm with me when it's done." I ended the call and handed the phone back to a man who looked like he'd seen a ghost. Just then, the door swung open again. It was Penelope, her own phone clutched in her hand, her face ashen. "Harold?" she stammered. "What's happening?" "I got an email. A joke. It says we've been acquired by." Her voice died as she followed his terrified gaze to me, standing calmly by the dusty workbench. I looked from her, to him, and then towards the warm light of the house. "Perhaps," I said, my voice cutting through the frozen air, "we should discuss this inside." I led the silent, shocked procession back into the kitchen. My father looked up from his newspaper, ready with a sarcastic remark, but it died on his lips when he saw the look on their faces. "What in God's name is going on?" he demanded. I stood in the heart of their home and delivered the truth. "For 5 years, you called my work a fantasy. You were wrong. I am the founder and CEO of Vanguard Dynamics. As of an hour ago, I own Sterling and Finch. And Dad," I said, turning to him, "as of 5 minutes ago, I also own Vance and Sons Manufacturing." That moment when you finally get to reveal the strength you've been hiding is a feeling like no other. It's not just revenge, it's reclamation. If you're here for that moment of finally taking back your power, hit that like button. Let the algorithm know that stories of quiet strength breaking through the noise need to be heard. The silence that filled the kitchen wasn't just quiet, it was the sound of a universe collapsing. My mother sank into a chair at the table, her hand over her mouth, muttering, "No, it can't be." My father, a man I'd never seen show a moment of weakness, looked like he had aged 20 years. His face was a pale, grayish color, his entire identity shattered in a single sentence. Penelope was the first to find her voice, a venomous, disbelieving hiss. "You're lying. This is some sick, elaborate joke." I didn't even look at her. I turned to Mr. Sterling, who was standing frozen by the door. "Harold," I said, my voice calm and even. "You just received an email with the new interim organizational chart for Sterling and Finch. Would you mind confirming for my sister who her new reporting manager is?" He just nodded numbly, unable to speak. I then looked at my family, each of them broken in their own way, and laid out the new terms. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a debriefing. "You're not fired, Penelope. Your work is adequate. But on Monday, you'll be reporting to my COO. Dad, I'm sending a generous offer for your remaining shares. You can finally retire. And Arthur," I said to my brother, "the era of entitlement is over. If you want a future at Vance and Sons, you'll interview for it." I wasn't there to burn the house down. I was there to take the deed, change the locks, and set new rules. The Vance family wasn't ending. It was simply under new management. That Christmas wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a long, awkward, and painful reconstruction. Fast forward 6 months. Our family gatherings are no longer held at the house in Lake Forest. Their quarterly business updates held over a sterile video conference call. My father accepted the buyout. Now he's just Walter, a retired man who rattles around a big house, struggling with a world that no longer asks for his opinion. He sends me clipped, formal emails with suggestions for the factory, a ghost trying to haunt a machine that has already evolved beyond him. Penelope is still at Sterling and Finch. She hates every second of it. For the first time in her life, she is being judged purely on her performance, not her name or her charm. The hierarchy she mastered is gone, replaced by a meritocracy I built. Our conversations are tense, strictly professional, but I see a flicker of something new in her eyes. Fear and a grudging respect. The biggest surprise has been Arthur. He walked away from the family money, applied for a junior manager position at the new factory, and is starting from the bottom. He's the only one who seems to understand that the old currency of entitlement is worthless now. My mother calls me once a week, her voice strained, trying to weave a fragile thread between the shattered pieces of our family. I learned that the act of revenge is a fiery, explosive moment. But the aftermath, that's the slow, quiet, complicated work of figuring out what, if anything, can be built from the ashes. So here we are, 6 months later, in this strange new reality my actions created. People ask me if it was worth it, if the revenge was as sweet as I imagined. The truth is, what I sought wasn't revenge, it was a rebalancing. It was a form of justice. My family wielded their legacy and their approval like a weapon, and in the end, the consequence was simply that I built a stronger one. They weren't punished by my success. They were eclipsed by the consequences of their own short-sightedness, a karmic bill that finally came due. The question of forgiveness is more complicated. I have learned that forgiving them for their disbelief is one thing, but the real work has been forgiving myself for the years I spent craving their validation. I had to forgive myself for thinking I needed their permission to be brilliant. The greatest lesson from that cold night in the garage wasn't about them. It was about me. I realized that true legacy isn't something that is handed down to you in a will or a trust. It's not something that can be given or taken away by others. It is the quiet, unshakable belief in your own worth, forged in the lonely hours when no one else is cheering for you. That garage wasn't my prison. It was my throne room, the place where I finally claimed my own sovereignty. Your value is not determined by your family's ability to see it. It is determined by your courage to build it, even in the dark, even in the cold. This story was my truth, and I know so many of you have your own. If you believe that your worth is non-negotiable and that you have the right to build your own legacy, then you belong here. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of people who are done waiting for permission to be powerful. Let's write these new stories together.